Good morning and welcome to Motivation Monday, where we start off your week with challenging conversations and inspiring stories. Well, a lot has been said about the country that we live in and the times that we live in. Is it possible to get a decent job without bribing your way through that? Is it possible even to rise through, whatever space you're in if you do not compromise in one way or the other? Is it possible to be a proper driver in this country of ours if you have not done one or two things that seem to be off the book, so to speak? Well, today's conversation is about how you and I can be people of integrity, how you and I can actually be people that can stand to be counted. Today, we are calling you to Hesabika. And joining us for this conversation is one that is just the right fit for it. Our guest is the regional manager for McCabe Center for Law and Cancer, and she is joining us today to help us appreciate how is it that you and I can actually be people of integrity, can have our lives count for something, how you and I tunaweza kuhesabika. And so kindly help me welcome Mrs. Rachel Divotu. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Pastor Mokai.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. I think this conversation is one of those conversations that is needful in the times that we are living in. It's not just a conversation for Christians, it's a conversation for all of us, because the implications, cut across. But it is a conversation especially for those who call on the name of the Lord. But before we begin, just into the nitty-gritties of the conversation for today, can you just introduce yourself to us? I've mentioned just a bit, but help us appreciate who Mrs. Rachel Divotu is.
Yeah, so I'm born again, been born again since the age of about 12.
Oh, wow.
Grew up in a Christian family, born again parents, attended Sunday school, the works. I'm a lawyer by profession. I work in the field of cancer control. So one of my jobs is at the McCabe Center for Law and Cancer. And I've worked especially on tobacco control for the last 20 years. So I did court for about 2 years, traditional litigation, and then formed my own NGO. Then thereafter I took jobs at the regional level and now at the global level.
Okay.
I spend my time training government lawyers on how to regulate cancer risk factors, tobacco being one of them. I also do a lot of advocacy in the tobacco control space. I'm also very passionate about changing the world around me. So law is my tool to do that. So I sit on several boards. So one of them is Hesabika.
Yeah.
And I joined Hesabika through the Fellowship of Christian Unions. So in campus, I was a member of the Christian Union. And when I graduated, they have what they call social action. So trying to get Christians to engage their profession to change society. Yeah. So as I said, for me, law is my tool of change. Hence, when you change laws by one stroke of a pen, you've changed every Kenyan's life. And so once I appreciated that, I moved from litigation into the advocacy space. I also sit on the board of the Kenya Cancer Association. I'm on the board of Hesabika, and I'm also on the board of the International Institute for Legislative Affairs. Okay. So I spend probably, I would call it maybe a third of my time on those other things. Yeah. The other thing I'm very passionate about is young people. I believe in being able to mentor the coming generations. Yeah. So part of the story of my success is that when I was very young, at 23, when I left litigation and joined the NGO sector, there are several people who held my hand. And so I believe we've got a duty to hold the hands of those who are coming behind us. I guess the last thing I could say is I'm a wife and a mother. I've got 3 children, 9, 7, and 5 years. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. You've mentioned that you sit on the board of Hesabika, and largely part of the conversation that we'll be talking today touches on what you do as an organization. So what is Hesabika, and what do you do at Hesabika?
So Hesabika stands for Standing Up to Be Counted. Our logo is hands up.
Okay.
And basically it talks about translating concerns into action. So every Kenyan has concerns, things that annoy them, things that worry them. We've just gone through Gen Z maandamanos, and there have been a lot of concerns. So the concerns could be economic, the concerns could be social, and Kenyans love to complain.
Yeah.
And so what Hesabika is saying is go beyond complaining to taking personal responsibility. Wherever you are, there's something you can do about that one issue that bothers you.
Yeah.
And so throughout my life, the one issue that bothers me the most is cancer. And at 23, it was control of tobacco. And so when you get an issue that bothers you, Hesabika says, take responsibility for that issue. So instead of pointing fingers at some, the politicians should do this, the parents should do that, the government, you know, in Kenya we like saying serikali's idea. No. As a Christian, if that issue bothers you, do something about it.
Yeah.
And so what Hesabika is a call to action that every Christian, wherever they are, in the little space that you occupy, if you're a teacher, Hesabika is a teacher, which means that you see your classroom as your mission field. Each of those children is where God expects you to make an impact. If you're a policeman, then the police station is your place to Hesabika. If you work in a hospital, then you have to be the best doctor there possibly can be, because you must stand up and be counted about the issues in your space. If you're a student, what impact are you making in your campus, in your classroom? In campus, I was a class rep, 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So I've always been political, and so I was a politician in campus. I was a student leader. When I got out, I joined a political party because the politics of this country bothered me. I campaigned in the 2007 elections. The issue of tobacco bothered me. I did something about it. I was actually one of the people who wrote the country's tobacco control law in 2007. And I was doing all of these things. By the time I was doing that, I was about 23. So that's just what Hesabika is, wherever you are. And it doesn't even have to be linked to your profession. The profession is the easiest because that's where you spend a lot of time. And so I think about Moses, and he was asked, what is that you have in your hand? And he said he had a stick. God used that stick. I think if Moses was a teacher, God would have used chalk, because that's what he would have had in his hand. If he was a doctor, he would have had a stethoscope. So there was nothing magic about the stick. It just happened to be what was in Moses' hand. And so what has God put in your hand that he expects you to use to change the society around you? And so that's what Hesabika is about.
All right. Thank you for that. One of the things, and you've mentioned a bit about, you know, as a people, we like complaining. But we do appreciate that our country is broken at various levels. When you consider the state of our country, what are some of those areas of brokenness that you see that really trouble your heart?
I think the brokenness are symptoms. The root for me is a lack of values. Because values dictates everything about what you do. It dictates what kind of job you take. It dictates what kind of spouse you marry. It dictates what kind of employee you're going to be at the workplace. It dictates what kind of parent you're going to be, what kind of child you are. It dictates everything. And so when we see corruption, it's a sign of a broken value system that is selfish, that thinks it's all about me, and that public property can become personal property. So the big problem in Kenya is a lack of values. And that's why a big part of what Hesabika works on is if each Christian got the right values, it would influence everything else. And so we've got a broken healthcare system. We've got a broken education system. We've got a broken political system. We've got a broken societal system, so families are collapsing. It's almost as if everything has got a problem. And I guess that's why Kenyans complain a lot, because there is a lot to complain about. When Gen Z had maandamano, the rest of us were okay. Let Gen Z solve. And so that kind of selfishness, where we don't even as a country have a national conversation. What does it mean to be a Kenyan? What is every Kenyan entitled to? What is my role in ensuring that not only am I just okay, and I'm speaking here as a middle-class person who had the benefit of a university education. So at the time I finished university 20 years ago, university-level students were still a minority. The numbers are increasing, but we are still a privileged class. And the middle class in Kenya is privileged. If you reached the university, you're privileged.
That's true.
And so how are you thinking about all those others who didn't get there? Is it just about you? And so you get a job, and you're immediately thinking about, I need a car. Then after that, I need a family. Then after that, I need to buy a plot. Then after that, I need to build a house. Then after that, I'm thinking about retirement. It's all about you. What about the system and the society within which you live?
Yeah.
And what is your role in ensuring that then there is a good Kenya for everybody? And so when we talk about our broken value system,
Yeah.
at the individual level is where the problems start. And so sometimes we think the politicians are the problem.
Yeah.
Yes, they are part of the problem, but remember, we vote for them.
That's true.
Which means we are also part of the problem.
And they are one of us.
They are one of us. We vote for someone who looks like us. So if you think the politicians are bad, you're bad also because you voted.
Yeah.
And if you didn't vote, you're also bad because you're part of the reason why they got in. You could have voted for somebody else.
There's no escape.
There's no escaping. All of us are at fault.
Yeah.
If you think corruption is about the politicians stealing, what's your contribution in corruption?
Yeah.
How many of us, you're caught on the road, you've got a mistake. Your first option is tuongee.
Yeah.
So you want to offer something.
Yeah.
How many of us have cheated in an exam? Because it's at that level.
That's true.
How many of us are doing masters and you're stealing your employer's time? You're stealing your employer's printing paper to print your thesis.
Oh.
You're a thief. So if you think the politicians are thieves, you're also a thief.
Wait, now you are touching on toes here. You mean, if I am doing a master's degree and I have evening classes, and of course they are not sufficient because I have assignments and I have term papers and things like those. And so that means somewhere in the day, I will be taking some of that time to do my assignment, my essay, my dissertation, and all those things. You mean I am no different from that politician who is stealing from the public coffers?
You're a thief. And I think it's not so much that you can't do that.
Yeah.
I think very often it's, do you declare?
Or does your employer know
What you are doing?
Yeah.
And one of the things I've struggled with, I've run an NGO, and I still sit on the board of one. And the faithfulness and fidelity of employees. You send people for courses, you train. No sooner are they done than they resign. I mean, even when you ask people, do they give notice? The law states that you're supposed to, depends on your contract, between 1 to 3 months notice. How many of us leave a job after we are paid the paycheck? 31st, it's cleared in the bank. Then you send a message, I'm done.
Yeah.
And you leave your employer in the lurch. It's happened to us so many times. And you're not thinking about this employer that you left suddenly, who has got programs they're running, donor conditionalities they need to meet. It will take maybe another 1 to 2 months to recruit. And you've left like that. And you say you're a Christian.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You're supposed, and they can't follow you. So fine, the law says that you can take them to court. The process of doing that is more. Going back to the story of masters, have you declared to your employer all the things that you are doing? So for example, it's 8:30. I'm not at work. So I've stolen somebody's time.
Yeah.
Because my employer pays to 5. Now, my employer is based in Australia. I live in Kenya.
Yeah.
So practically, they can't follow me around to know. They have to trust that I'm where I'm supposed to be. So now in the era of working from home, there are many people who are stealing from the employer because they can't manage you by eyeballing you.
Yeah.
So they have to trust, or alternatively, you have to indicate. And so that's just telling your employer, I'm doing a master's. There are certain times I'll be unavailable, being upfront about them. How many people have faked illness because they were doing an exam? Or you simply switch off your phone and your boss can't find you because you didn't want to declare. Even when you're looking for a new job, once you've gone to that second interview, third interview, how many of you declare?
But how do you declare? Surely, how do you tell your boss, I am applying for another job, knowing you may jeopardize this and the other one is not yet sure?
That is where integrity comes in.
Aha.
There is no place I have left that the employer does not know where I was going. In fact, I remember my first job at a law firm. And when they let me go, I had to write them in my CV as my reference.
Yeah.
And so I was less than 2 years in the marketplace. So I didn't have a choice that I could pick and choose who I wrote as a reference. So I wrote my previous boss. So I got the job. And when I arrived at the office at 8 o'clock, the phone rang. And it was my previous boss.
Yeah.
So I was shocked.
Yeah.
So he said, hello, Rachel, how are you? I said, I'm fine. How do you know where I am? He said, you wrote me as a reference and they called me. That's when I realized how important it is how you live.
Okay.
I mean, unless you intend not to write them as a reference, the one that you shafted like that, you just left. Where will you ever put their name? And what do you think they will say when they are called? So he could sense I'm shocked. He said, no, don't worry. I only told them good things. And so I learned a lot about how you treat an employer and more importantly about how you live. And so each time I've transitioned out of a job, I give notice. And so when I was leaving the law firm to go into the NGO sector, I gave my boss notice. And typically in law firms, many people don't do that. They said they just pick the paycheck and they go.
Yeah.
So my boss first was shocked. So he called me. He said, is it that you want a pay raise? I said, no, if I wanted one, I would just have told you I need more money.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving because of money. Then he asked me, where are you going? I said, to be honest, I don't know. I just feel that God has told me that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. So I knew I was going into the advocacy space. I didn't have a job yet, but I just knew I had to leave. And so I told him, I've given you notice so that in the 1 month I'm here, I can hand over properly and you can start looking for another employee.
Yeah.
Now, there's no employer who will not allow you to serve notice. So I've always served notice. I've never been shafted.
Yeah.
That now because I've told him I'm leaving, then I'm booted out and procedurally.
Yeah.
And I still, when I went and moved to West Africa and when I came back and I needed some documents notarized, I called my previous law firm. And because of the way I left, they told me, come and we'll do it for free.
Yeah, wow.
And so integrity is about the choices that you make on a daily basis. What you do with somebody's time, what you do with somebody's money, what you do with promises, and when you give your word. And so when you sign an employment contract, you have given your word. A lot of Christians are liars. Because when you signed that, it said that when I'm leaving, I will give
this amount of notice.
What does the Bible say about keeping your word?
Where? Okay. Welcome back. This is Motivation Monday, where we start off your week with challenging conversations and inspiring stories. And what a conversation we are having today. Where? Tumefikiwa sisi wote. Are you one that can stand to be counted? Do you take your employer's time? Do you take pens from the office and give them to your children? In fact, do you use more tissue in the office place than you use at home? These are the conversations we are having today if we are to be people that can stand to be counted. My name is Elijah Mokaya and I am joined with Mrs. Rachel Divotsu. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, too much happening just in terms of how you are painting this picture of being people of integrity. Because at times I think we imagine it to be the big issues. If I'm not misappropriating public funds, you know, if I'm not stealing millions, then perhaps I am not badly off. Could it be that our excuse for the small things is what has led to now even the big things completely disintegrating?
I believe so. And, you know, when I started the NGO, I used to account down to this last shilling. So accounts would read photocopying 273 shillings. You couldn't even round off to 270. And when you look at trust, people trusting you with their money. And so we like talking about government corruption. But remember I said there's a giver and the taker of a bribe. So for every person taking, there's another person giving. And so a lot of us are the givers. And so it starts there. How faithful are you with small things before you come to big ones? And so even when you look at within the family setting, what are we modeling to our children? Because they're learning all these things from us. And one of the biggest influences in my life is my father. My father is the most black and white person I know. And everybody knows him. So integrity is, what do people know about you? What do they say about you? And so in the village, every policeman knows my dad. Huyu mzee, ukimsimamisha. He is known. I remember he helped campaign for the local MP. She wanted to put him on the CDF committee. All the local businessmen said no.
They refused.
This man, if you put him, there will be no stealing money for classrooms. So he is so black and white. And so I learned that from him from an early age, that there is wrong and there is right. There are no gray areas with my father. And so everybody knows him like that. He can come across as very strict, as very uncompromising, but I believe integrity is about being unequivocal. People need to know where you stand. On this issue, we already know what Rachel is going to say. And we know what she thinks about it. And so it starts at that level. And you see, then that influences the little choices that you make every day. And so if you're not going to steal anything of your employer, then hopefully when you get into public service, then you will not steal public resources. And so we always like thinking that it's only those in big positions. I believe for a lot of Kenyans that they lack the opportunity. If they had access to those millions, they would be taking too. And so it all starts with your sense of values. What are the things that you can and cannot do? And it doesn't matter where you are. those things should still remain constant.
Yeah.
That I cannot do this. It doesn't matter to what level you elevate me.
Yeah.
And so when your boss talks about you, what do they say?
Okay.
That when I think of Mokai, what's the first word that comes to mind? Is it that they come late? They never make it on time? Time is another thing I'm so particular about. Maybe because I've worked with Wazungu a lot. But I get so irritated when people are late. If you told me it's 8:30, then you should be here at 8:30. And if you can't be here, you should send a message, I'm late, and a genuine reason.
Why?
Cell phones came to help us cheat. Nimetoka. That time you're at home. Now you know where you are.
You're not even prepared.
And you're busy cheating the other person on the other side. Vile umetoka and you've not left. And so those small things, because that's where character is born. And so when I think about the conversations my children over here, when we're driving in the car with my husband, and somebody drives in his path and he yells, what do my kids learn about how you deal with others?
You yell at them.
When we can't say sorry, we can't say please. Your kids are watching you. See the things they're learning. And so the same impact my father had on my set of values is the same impact I'm having on my kids. And because it's not deliberate, you don't know. But they're like little sponges. They're absorbing things. And so how do our children learn about corruption? When you give the cop 100 shillings, your child is watching.
That's what, it reminded me a story. It was a funny one. No, it was not a story. It was a skit, a comedic skit of this parent that, the child was unruly in school. And so whenever the child will do something, the child is suspended or expelled, the father will go, give the principal something, and this with the child, say, imaneno, wacha ishe. And we'll do that several times. One day, the child, I think, did something horrible. And the father picked the belt and wanted to beat the child. And so the child goes to the wallet and removes money and says, Daddy, wacha imaneno ishe.
It's not how problems are solved in this country.
And that's a sad reality that even in our own homes and how we are living our lives, we are actually influencing the next generation in the kind of value system that they have.
I mean, I imagine, how do we treat our housemaid? And what does that tell your children about how you treat people that you think are beneath you? So is your housemaid beneath you?
Wow.
If you abuse your housemaid, if you mistreat the housemaid, the kids are watching.
If you pay them poorly.
You pay them badly.
Yeah,
they are watching.
Wow. But now you've said something. And even in the example you used about your dad, this opportunity that even passed him because of his value system, we can't escape this whole idea about the pain of being a person of integrity. Just touch on that, because we are not saying that it is all rosy, that there is a price to pay. What do you think is the price to pay for integrity?
I think there is a price to pay, but there's also the flip of what place we put God in. And so when I look at, for example, I started an NGO, as I told you, and we were very clear we were a Christian NGO. So the name has no Christ in it. It's the International Institute for Legislative Affairs. But we were very clear what kind of topics we can deal with. And in the NGO sector, sometimes people follow the money. We were very clear what was the criteria that guided what topics we picked up. And so there were certain funds that we couldn't tap into. Right now, a big one is sexual reproductive health rights. And there's a lot of money for that. We were clear we cannot compromise on that front because there's a lot of things in that space that are inimical to the Christian faith. I was very clear in my life there were certain industries I could not work for because the products that they sell are harmful. So I cannot work for tobacco, I cannot work for alcohol, I cannot work for big food, I cannot work for petroleum. And so,
really? Even
yes,
petroleum?
they pollute.
Yeah.
So just having that very clear in my mind, what I can and cannot do, and therefore then there are some opportunities that you may have to turn down.
Yeah.
I remember when we got married and my husband said, the purpose of marriage is to stay together. When you are a bachelor, celibacy was okay.
Yeah.
Once you got married, you married this person to live with them. So we are very clear as a family, there are certain jobs we cannot take that involve separating the family. And so if one of us moves, the whole family moves.
Wow.
So I'm lucky in my profession where I am now. I guess I can pick jobs that keep me in Kenya. But there are some jobs that I cannot take because it involves living apart from my husband and my children. Now, I understand sometimes people need to go and do masters.
Yeah.
But even that, he turned down a master's opportunity because it would have required him to go to Korea, spend 1 year learning Korean before the 4 years of class. And he said, 5 years apart, that's not why we got married.
Yeah.
And so this set of values determines everything. Now, of course, it can be difficult. Maybe you're a judge, maybe you're a magistrate, maybe you work with government and you get transferred around. But those are the kind of conversations, even at a family level, that you have to discuss. What kind of thing shall we do? Do you get a job with the UN or the WHO? At the level I am now, I can easily get a job there. And then I'm posted to New York, and I leave my family in Nairobi. As a family, we agreed, no, we don't do that, because we got married to live together. So that's the pain that you feel, because then there are some things that you will have to turn down. For the young people, I always tell people I never got any job by so-called connections. And I talk to a lot of young people today, and they're like, without a connection, you cannot get a job. Yes, there is a sense of that. But the flip for me was, what is the role of God in my life? And the point at which I left the law firm, remember I told you I left and I didn't know where I was going? I actually resigned a paid-for job. I had a salary, and I was not fired for incompetence. I'm the one that resigned, and my boss even wanted to raise the income. I just felt I'd gotten a very clear calling from God, and he was telling me, stop the litigation. I want you to go into the NGO space. I didn't have the NGO then. I'm trained as a lawyer, so I knew drafting of legal papers. I knew going to court. I knew zilch about NGO sector. So I resigned without a job, and I lived by faith for 1 to 2 years.
Wow.
Trusting God for everything from rent. I tell you, Pastor Mokaya, the prayers I used to pray. Lord, I knew how to pray, because when you're praying for rent, it's different. It's different when rent is due tomorrow and you don't have it today. The kind of business you transact with God at midnight on your knees in tears. And you're telling him, if you don't come through tomorrow, I'm done for. And you know, miracles would happen, Pastor Mokaya. I remember one time a member of my Bible study called me, come to town, we have lunch. And I had 20 shillings in my pocket. So I was debating, na 20 bob. Do I buy skuma? Do I buy a packet of milk? Do I pay bus fare to town? At which point hakuna kurudi? So anyway, I went for lunch. After he's bought the lunch, he said, God told me to give you 4,000 shillings.
Wow.
I don't know what it is for. It was rent. And you know, God used to give the exact amount that I needed. There was never extra. So I had no cushion. I had no plan B. Plan A was God and God only. Now, of course, I'm beyond that. Now I'm at a place where I can say I'm comfortable. But those 2 years, there's some lessons that God had to teach me. And so to the young people who are listening today, the world is even more difficult now than it was then. But God has not changed. And so the question is, how are you transacting with God? Because if you believe those verses, he owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. He can sell 1 cow for you. But it's how you walk with him.
Your issues.
He can sort you. But it depends on God, if you walk with him, and it's his business. Because at that point, I remember 6-7 months in, and I was struggling. And I asked God, should I just go back to the law firm? After all, I was not incompetent. And he said, no, I called you. Then I told him, since this is your work, you're going to take care of it. And if I tell you the story of how we got our first grant, 2 years of people giving. I had board members, this month they give, sometimes they don't. And that's another thing. Remember we talked about keeping our word? How many Christians are faithful? You pledged to a certain organization to give. And now you're not giving. And you excuse uchumi ni mbaya. You made a promise. So if you pledged you're going to support X, and you said a certain amount,
you better do that.
You pay faithfully. So anyway, I went through that phase of people pledging and some not giving, and the prayers at midnight. And so I'm invited to this conference in the US. My last 10,000 shillings, I went to pay the US visa. And I walk into this interview and I'm thinking, God, I'm 23, I'm single, unmarried, no children, no job, no ties to Kenya. The US is not giving me a visa. Remember all these people who are saying, oh, US doesn't give visas? I was like, I'm not the kind that's going to be given. But I said, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not going to lie about my state. So employer letter, I wrote one for myself. In fact, I had to make a logo for the organization. And wrote, I'm employed. I printed my bank statement, reading 0. And I walked in and told God, please, no questions. I cannot answer with a straight face. I'm not going to lie here. So just ensure the questions are those I can answer. And so I walked in, I was carrying a novel. And so I sat there from about 7. 1 is when I was reaching the counter, hearing people being denied. And I'm like, even me, I'm being denied. Then I walked up to the counter and the lady noticed my book. So we started a conversation about novels, our favorite authors. I wondered, is this the interview? So after about 5 minutes, she's like, okay, now let's start. Why are you going to the US? So I produced my letter of invitation. And then she said, how long are you going to be there? I said, 10 days. She said, come for your visa tomorrow. My mouth fell open.
Wow.
I asked her, just like that. She said, don't you want the visa? I'm like, yes. Here's your passport.
Yeah.
That's how I got my first visa. So for all those people who are fake bank statements, a Christian doesn't do that.
Hey, today you're really coming for everyone.
If it is God that has sent you there, but you have to walk with him.
Yeah.
So with God, you can't walk nusu-nusu. Either you walk with him or you do the world system, but you cannot mix the two. And what I've found in my life is that God has been faithful. So people look at me now. I'm successful. I can't pretend I'm not. But I remind them that 20 years ago,
it was a different story.
I moved from my house in Ngumo. I moved to Kasarani to reduce the rent. I used to walk around. I had dusty shoes. I was wearing jeans, a T-shirt, and dusty sneakers. For 2 years, I lived by faith. And once I put that faith in God, and so I tell people, your employment is in God's hands. You don't have to do these things that other people are. If you're a Christian, the rest of the world can do those things.
Yeah.
God can take care of you. But for God to take care of you, it's like Daniel and his friends. Daniel survived 4 kings.
Yeah,
4.
that's true.
And those kings were not good people. If you know who Nebuchadnezzar was, by the time he came to when he was Belteshazzar, it was not easy.
Yeah.
How did Daniel survive? It's because he said, I walk like this. And everybody knew. For Daniel, they knew. At X time, Daniel is praying. And that's where they caught him, because they couldn't catch him on anything else. Yet through all of that, God took care of him. So if you're a civil servant, God will take care of you. You can turn down the corruption and trust God to protect that job. I have a friend who works in immigration, and they used to get money to allow people in and procedurally. You remember a guy called Öcalan? He was a Turkish terrorist and on the wanted list of the Americans. And so the day he came in, my friend was not on duty. And then the US called the Kenyan government and said, that guy is in your country. They tried blustering. They were told, we can even tell you where he is. So of course some heads had to roll, yeah? So whoever was on duty that day, heads rolled. After that, my friend said, iyo pesa sitaki. I'm not taking any more.
Yeah.
And she told everybody on shift, when we're on shift together, we are not allowing anybody in. So she rose through the ranks. And at one point, her minister calls her, oh, there's someone I hear you're deporting. Amenipigia, let him in. She said, sir, with all due respect, I'm not signing his papers. If you want to let him in, you come to the airport and stamp. Because when heads roll, they will look who stamped, and it is me.
Yeah.
Put it in writing. Me, I'm not taking instructions by phone. If you don't send something in writing on your letterhead you have signed, this man is being deported. Everybody's like, how do you talk to the minister like that? She's like, I'm just doing my job. She still works at immigration up to now. Over 20 years in the system.
Wow.
And so all those who feel I'm under pressure, there could be some pain. You could be fired. It's a possibility.
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said what?
We will not
we are
bow.
not bowing.
Yeah.
And our God can take care of us. But even if he won't, we are
still
ready.
will not bow.
And he came through.
Yeah.
And so for every case where someone has been victimized, there is another case where God has come through. But for God to come through, umetangaza msimamo. And once you everybody knows.
Yeah.
She said on shift, they all knew. When there's somebody to be sneaked in, hata one advice, this lady leo ako kazi. So mukuje jioni.
Mukuje saa ingine.
Mukuje saa ingine.
Wow.
And so once people know your stand, there are some things they don't ask you. Right now in the office, my office is headquartered in Australia. There are things that in their culture they allow that are inimical to my faith. So there are some conversations I don't take part in. There are times I choose kucheza chini ya maji, you don't talk about it. So there's a time they were writing an article. On the face of it, it looked innocuous. It was human rights. I have no problem with human rights. Until unaongeza vitu ya LGBTQ. Then I was like, my name cannot appear on that article.
Yeah.
Yani, Rachel Kitonyo's name is attached. So I was not trying to figure out, how do I duck out of writing this article? Because sections are being distributed, you know?
Yeah.
So eventually I just said, I'm not available. I didn't give my reasons, but I didn't. And you know, in our field, people want to publish. People want their names to be known.
Yeah.
But then you have to think about, what am I attaching my name to? Because whatever I attach my name to, my credibility, my reputation goes on the line.
Yeah.
And so I declined. So I'm lucky. I've got a good boss. I told you I have 3 jobs. My boss is aware of all of them. And whenever I want to add another one, I go and tell my boss.
Yeah.
So remember, you asked me, you're not afraid you'll be fired?
Yeah.
I'm such a quality employee. She's willing to share me with others.
Wow.
Because if you tell me no, nitaenda kwingineko.
Quality employee. I like that.
Yes, I'm a quality employee.
So if we do this right, if we are people that can stand to be counted, that is what we become. Quality employees and quality workers, or in whatever space you're in. You become such a person of quality that you're able to get the concessions.
People will want, there's no employer who wants a thief, who wants a liar. Even if they themselves are, they still want good and decent employees. And so one of the things I've learned at the workplace, because your name is everything. Your name is everything.
Yeah.
And so what you've built around your name, that is your trademark. And so it reaches a certain point. The initial years are hard, and I appreciate that. Even the legal practice is not easy. But I remember one of the things we were told first year orientation, Gitu Muigai came to speak to us. And we are law students. We are feeling, we are the cream of the cream, I mean, to study law those days, 150 law students. So to make it to the law campus, you are clearly...
Was a big deal.
Yeah. And then he comes and says, only 10% here are lawyers. The rest are cooks and watchmen. Ooh. We were offended. And he said, if you're a cook and a watchman, please leave. And he speaks with that British accent, and we really felt offended. But I think the point he was making was excellence. That an excellent lawyer is never going to lack employment, is never going to lack a job. And once I internalized that and decided I was not a cook and a watchman, I was in that 10%. So for a young person starting out in the job market, it is excellence. If you get a chance at internship, what kind of intern are you? Are you the intern that walks in at 9 when employment hours are 8? Even when you come at 8 and there is no work? Do you then become the intern that's playing games on their phone? Your boss is watching. And normally the first week, they just look at you. You're sent to make tea. And you there, a student. I don't make tea. Make the tea if that's what you be the most excellent tea maker they've ever seen. Until they say, if you want tea. So excellence at the workplace. And I believe if you're excellent, you will get promoted. Because God is also a God of excellence. God is fair. You think God doesn't know what you need?
He does.
He knows you need a salary. He knows you've got a family. But he says, if you walk with me, it's a Daniel style. Unatangaza msimamo, and everybody knows that is the kind of person. So and so does not take bribes. So and so does not tolerate lateness. So and so does not. Then they don't bring those things to you. Those things will happen, but they will not be happening where you are. God will shield you. Lakini lazima utangaze msimamo.
Wow. Welcome back. This is Motivation Monday, where we start off your week with challenging conversations and inspiring stories, and today is one of those challenging conversations. In fact, we'd love to hear from you as we are having this conversation. What are some of the things that are just going through your mind? In what ways are you going to translate your concern into action as you listen to this? Send us your feedback, your comment. 20316 is our SMS line. 0786316316 is our WhatsApp line. We would love to hear from you. My name is Elijah Mokaya, and our guest today is Mrs. Rachel Devotu. And so let's get back to this conversation that we are having. Now, thank you so far for just helping us appreciate, but also even just from your own life's experiences, how you have applied these things. Sometimes I think when we have conversations about integrity and value systems, it just seems like theoretical. It's almost as though it is impossible to do these things. But now as we sort of get into practical application, there's someone there listening, watching, and people are in different situations. There could be a young person that is just thinking, like me when I came from the slum, and at least before I got born again, my purpose in life was to get away from poverty as far as possible. There could be someone there thinking, I cannot get back to this life, and I will, make it by nook or crook, to borrow the words of someone, I will get rich or die trying, so to speak. Somebody else is there, and they have risen through the system, and how they have risen, they've not risen through proper means. And if they have to change now, they are worried about the implications. Whatever situation one finds themselves in, How are they supposed to process all this that we're talking about?
So I'll start with one experience. So when I came back from West Africa, I did a stint of about 4 years. And before I left, of course, I was on the payroll. So I was paying taxes. My PIN was active. And normally, I think when a PIN goes silent, they assume you're out of the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So anyway, I came back, and I didn't resume paying taxes. So I'm not always good. Everybody has points where they fail.
Yeah.
And so then we decided to buy a car and to register a car. Logbook, you pay stamp duty. So my PIN became active again. And so I guess in the system somewhere it noted, PIN imetumika tena. And I don't work for KRA, so I don't know about their systems. And the reality is that KRA will not chase most of us small people. They don't have the resource for it.
Yeah.
They may be working on it right now, but certainly in 2016 when I came back, they wouldn't really bother with you.
Yeah.
So 2016, I didn't pay taxes. 2017, I didn't pay taxes. I was in the private sector. So the easiest people to tax are those in the public.
Yeah.
And then I got a consultancy job, and they asked for my PIN certificate for withholding tax. And I knew sasa nitapatikana. So when I went to calculate what I owed in back taxes, I paid the government of Kenya 1.2 million.
Wow.
It wiped out my savings down to zero. Now, you talked about paying the cost. That was the cost of getting back.
Wow.
Into the right. I pay taxes faithfully now. I pay. And so a lot of people complain, what the government does with the taxes. That's not the point. You're supposed to pay. And so there's a lot of people in the private sector who don't pay because it's very hard for the government to get you. But if you're a Christian, you should be paying. And so I paid. I paid a price to get back in. You can imagine it wiped me out.
Yeah.
I even had to sell some shares. As in, I was loaded with penalties. What? Yani niligongwa.
Yeah.
So now I pay. I learned the cost of not paying, two more stories I'll share. So I told you I did a stint in politics.
Yeah.
So I joined a political party. I got to work at the party secretariat, and I was the PA of a member of parliament. And so my member of parliament trusted me so much. We would go to the bank on Friday. She removes 1 million shillings and she gives it to me.
Where?
And I'm in charge of paying things at the constituency. And you can imagine I was 23, so I'd never seen 1 million shillings in one spot at the same time.
Yeah.
But she trusted me so much with the money. And everybody now knew that that's the girl with the money.
Yeah.
And you know, the funny thing was, I wasn't even from her tribe. So most people couldn't get that. Because the Kenyan politics is all, it's tribe, it's what. I was happy. Didn't speak a single word of Kiluya, even though my mother is Luya.
Yeah.
And I worked for her almost for free for almost 2 years. Now, while I was in the political system, because again, we are told Kenyan politics cannot be clean.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time, we were campaigning in Western. She was in the wrong political party. And so we're going to have a rally, and youth had been mobilized to stone her, what.
Yeah.
So we are seated discussing, and she's like, I can't be stoned in my backyard. Should we also hire some youth? I mean, we can pay. If they can pay, we can pay.
Yeah.
So that really troubled me. So the whole night, and I'm going to be the one to pay. Remember, I'm the one who handles money here.
Yeah.
So it's going to be me handing out 500, 1,000 shillings.
Yeah.
And then somebody's son gets hit by a stone. And it's
For money you pay.
Yeah. So eventually in the morning, I told her, madam, here we can't do this. We are Christians. Me, I'm a Christian, you are a Christian. We are not doing this. And if you decide you're doing, me, I'm not paying. You just go and do, but me, I'm not doing. And so those choices that you have to make, and people will just say Kenyan politics is violent. That's the way it's done.
Yeah.
But then you have to decide, am I a Christian in politics? Can I do the things my opponents do?
Yeah.
Or can I not do? Now, eventually, she lost that election. I don't think it was because of a lack of paying stone throwers. I think it was bigger things at play. But it just taught me that even in a dirty political system like politics, it is possible to do it differently. And again, the thing there is your value system. If you think that it is these gimmicks that are going to get you re-elected, then you're going to do it. If you believe that it is God who has called you there, even if it is for one term, then you'll do what it takes to be a person of integrity for that one term. But one of the things I can tell you, our Kenyan politics is noisy. In the NGO that I worked in, we had an MP that had been an MP for 4 consecutive terms. He was not a sycophant, because people believe to be re-elected you must be a sycophant.
Yeah.
He simply served his people well, managed his CDF well, managed to pass 3 bills through the House as a private member.
Wow.
And the point at which he left is not because the people didn't want him. He said, surely they are the sons of the soil that have been born in this area. He's Honorable Ekuton. Very few Kenyans know him. 3 bills he helped our NGO pass through the House.
Wow.
Unclaimed financial assets. We did a bill on road safety with him, and there was a third one we're working on, the point at which he left. So it is possible to be a politician of integrity. It's just that the ones we hear...
That dirty politics.
Yes. And remember, he was standing, Kanu, in an opposition zone. But the people loved this guy. So they told me, then matter usimame na chama gani, we are going to vote for you.
Yeah.
And so it is possible, even in politics, to maintain integrity. I remember the MP that I worked for told me, a lot of women rise by sleeping around. Don't rise that way. So the temptation was there. MPs have got money. And she just told me, that's the one clear thing she told me don't do. The rest I learned by observing her. But that was the one day she sat down and told me what not to do.
Yeah.
And so when girls are thinking, I have to sleep around to get a job, no, you don't have to do that. Last story I'll share, and this was when I still worked at the law firm.
Yeah.
So the law firm I worked for was known as a Christian law firm. And so there are many things that lawyers do. So you go to court, you ask for unnecessary adjournments, you are not prepared, or you forgot, or you don't have your witnesses, then you go to court and cheat. So anyway, I'm in this court in Kajiado, and I was really tempted to, you know, we call them small lies.
White lies.
White lies.
Yeah.
Now, I'm lucky I didn't. I actually just owned up and said, I'm sorry, on this one, we just fumbled, and we are not ready to proceed.
Yeah.
So at the end, the magistrate summoned me to her chambers and said, you work for X law firm. I actually know your boss. And that's when I realized, had I said that lie, and she's a Christian, she knows my boss is a Christian, she knows they hire Christians. So when I walked in and said where I come from, she already expected a certain kind of conduct from me. Now, had I done the opposite, and you know, you don't know who knows you.
That's true.
So there could be someone listening to me today who knows, oh, Rachel is a Christian. Then the next time they meet me, I'm doing something funny, because you don't know.
Yeah.
So it taught me, as I said, integrity at the workplace, because your reputation precedes you. And when people walk in, they're expecting a certain...
Yeah.
And then you do something funny because of the expediency of the moment. And so throughout my life, I've always had to remind myself, who am I? And who do people think I am? And therefore, the small things that you do. So as I'm saying, lawyers do that all the time. And they don't even see like it's... But I had to decide, I can't be that kind of person.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to try and be conscientious. When I'm wrong, just acknowledge and offer to pay the adjournment fees for the other side. You know, not try, you know. And in every profession, there are those things that people, you know, try. And they say it's just a small. There's no small. It's every single day how you live your life. Because people are watching. We're told of a cloud of witnesses. We like thinking it's a spiritual cloud. There's also a physical one down here. And it's watching. And so what do they say? And they go home. I think about those who work in government offices. Back again, and this is the last story, to my friend in immigration. And she used to read the newspaper columns. You know that one, the complaint one? I don't know what it's called. Nairobi Watchman. There's just a column. And she would identify all the cases of complaint in immigration. Someone has said their passport is delayed. She would go and sort it out.
Wow.
A lot of those people didn't know their passport suddenly appeared because somebody was reading the column and they had complained. Because she said, that's the only thing in my space. I can't reform the whole system. I can at least help those ones. So even if it's 3 people who got a passport sorted, I've helped somebody.
So there are people who got sorted and they don't even know.
They don't know. Suddenly, where a passport had been a problem, they came the next week and the passport was. So I think my closing remarks are, it's not about the big things. You can't solve all of Kenya's problems. And God didn't call you to solve all of them. He called you to solve the ones that you can solve within your sphere of influence. So in your office, forget about the whole system. I'm a teacher, I don't know. You can't solve TSC.
Ebu taja fundis and their reputation.
That's the other one. Again, the small lies, isn't it? Nishaanza na nguo yako. Alafu 3 weeks later you come,
and the wedding is tomorrow.
And then you're forced to, you know. So it's just small things. Or taking 3 jobs when you know, many people cannot say no. One of the things I've had to learn is to say no when I can't take on.
Yeah.
Because there are those small lies we give. You're asked to join this board. You know you don't have the time.
Yeah.
But you can't say no for whatever reason. Either A, maybe they pay a per diem, or B, you've just not learned how to say no. Once you give your time, it's a promise of time.
Yeah.
So if you knew it was 6 board meetings a year, you must make the time. What other thing were you doing? If not, then you should resign and say that I cannot. You offered to mentor.
Yeah.
And then you never have time. You gave your word. You should just have said no. It's better to say no than to promise things that you cannot.
Yeah.
So we started off with fundis who promise what they cannot. Have you ever been given an assignment at work and you know that you really cannot do it? Sometimes you just go to the boss and say, here, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
So either A, I can't do it, or B, this is what I need to do it, or C, this is the help that I need.
Yeah.
Acknowledging your inability is not a problem.
Yeah.
People will be willing to help.
Yeah.
That's being truthful. That's being faithful. And for me, that's what integrity in the marketplace is. As I said, when you need that time off to go and do an exam, just tell your employer the truth.
Communicate it.
I'm doing a master's.
Yeah.
This whole month is exam time. I'm going to need this. Declare. Maybe discuss with their workmates who can help. Just be honest about it.
Yeah.
Most people, they want to keep the honest employee. You will not be fired for being honest.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I like it. And I think one of the things I am coming out of this conversation with, if you are a person of quality, if you're an employee, that means a quality employee. If you are a fundi, a quality fundi. If you know, whatever space, if you're a cook, a quality whatever space, even a quality employer, God has a way of blessing that. And so we can all stand to be counted. Thank you so much, Mrs. Rachel Divotsu. What a conversation we have had. Unfortunately, our time is up, but I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. In fact, I'm asking myself, what areas of my life do I need to change? What things do I need to declare to certain people? So thank you so much for this conversation. Well, we have come to the end of our conversation for today. Stand to be counted. Hesabika, that is what we are talking about. And begin with your sphere of influence, there where you are. Yes, you cannot solve all of Kenya's problems, but at least you can sort out your areas of concern. And indeed, as is the mantra for Hesabika, turn and translate your concerns into actions. We pray that this has been an insightful conversation to you, and so kindly let us hear in what ways this has transformed your life. And so send us your feedback, comment. 20316 is our SMS line. 0786316316 is our WhatsApp line. Before I go, this is a good time to remind us that Family Media is able to continue doing this by virtue of partnership with men and women like yourself. And so if you will desire to be one of our partners, kindly send an SMS with the word partner to 20316 and somebody will get back to you. But if you have a gift that you would like to give, feel free to do that through the paybill number 316 and for account, kindly write your phone number. Well, this is goodbye from us, but please remember to translate your concerns into actions. See you again next Monday.